The ICDR is the world's leading provider of dispute resolution services. Find out why global expertise matters. Visit ICDR.org.
I used to be a bit of a rubbish sleeper. I'd toss and turn all night. And somehow I could never find the comfy bit of the mattress. It was a proper nightmare. That's what brought me here. Testing mattresses in the Witch Test Lab. We use a custom-made barrel rolling machine to simulate a decade's worth of use. And the mattresses that perform best are the only ones we recommend for your bedroom. Witch.co.uk. Our tests find you the best.
A lot of people aren't aware that TuneIn lets you listen to the same terrestrial stations that you pick up on your FM AM dial, except you can hear them from anywhere. To see all the stations broadcasting in your area, find the local radio section on the home screen. Keep it local with TuneIn.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
On this week's On the Media, we are awash in messages, but some messengers are more effective than others.
Ventilators, ventilators, ventilators. We need 30,000.
Meanwhile, some media outlets choose not to air the president's press briefings live, and media critics ponder what's the right balance between good information and all information. All that and more on this week's On the Media from WNYC. Listen to the On the Media podcast on TuneIn today.
Not all heroes wear capes, but most wear tights.
And here we go. Now it's underway. Cover. Oh, Rowan. Wait a second.
Keep up with everything happening in the wild world of pro wrestling with the TuneIn podcast. For expert analysis of the latest WrestleMania, turn on the WWE podcast. Or listen to the Steve Austin Show for no-holds-barred conversations with wrestling's biggest personalities.
It's good to be here tonight. It's an empty building.
For these and more, search sports and scroll down to the world of wrestling. Keep up with everything happening in the wild world of pro wrestling with the TuneIn podcast. For expert analysis straight from the WWE to Steve Austin's no-holds-barred conversations with wrestling's biggest personalities, search sports and scroll down to the world of wrestling to listen.
With BNY Mellon, we help alternative investment managers create great experiences for their clients. Whether it's customized financing, securities lending solutions, platform access, or outsourced trading, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and dedicated to meeting your evolving demand.
Learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and alternative managers. Visit Pershing.com. Pershing LLC. Member FINRA, NYSE SIPC.
Leaders are born.
What does it take to get the markets back on the rails?
Born leaders are here.
The timeline for that can be slow.
Karen Moscow.
Several nations are negotiating to evacuate diplomats.
And Nathan Hager.
How are you advising clients to navigate the shifting headlines?
Bloomberg Daybreak. Weekday mornings at 5 Eastern.
Are we heading into correction territory, do you think?
On Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg. The world is listening. News without analysis is like half a bridge.
Why is the debt to GDP ratio still so important?
Those things, once they're set in place, stay around for years.
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and BloombergRadio.com.
Broadcasting live to London on DAB Digital Radio. To New York, Bloomberg 1130. To Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1. To Boston, Bloomberg 106.1. To San Francisco, Bloomberg 960, and around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app at BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Good morning from the Bloomberg Bureau in Berlin. I'm Matt Miller.
And I'm Caroline Hepker. Warm welcome to the program. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
At 9:30 UK time. It's 10:30 here in Berlin. Let me give you a quick check of what's going on in these markets right now. In terms of the equity indexes, first off, we're seeing decent gains across the board, really. The DAX is up 2.5% or 250 points right now to just over 10,062. We're looking at gains on the FTSE 100 in London, 2% or 107 points to 56 71. In terms of other risk indicators, we see Treasury yields down a little bit. Right now, 69 basis points even for U.S. 10 years. The German Bund is trading for negative 48 basis points, and the gilts are trading for just under 37 basis points. You can buy just over 108 Japanese yen for $1 US, and the euro is falling against the greenback right now to 109.97. The pound trading at 123.35. Probably the most interesting asset to watch has been over the last couple of weeks, oil, as it comes down spectacularly. Right now, we do see a little bit of a recovery in the price for Brent crude, but the level is still very low, $23.30 a barrel. NYMEX WTI trading for $21.15 a barrel. And Caroline, I saw yesterday actually some oil buyers were actually paying the producer 19 cents a barrel not to ship it to them because they have nowhere else to put it. That was for, I think it was like Missouri sour, some sour crude, but still paying the producer to keep it.
Well, it's about storage now, isn't it? Because we're so awash in oil. But there's also a really interesting headline, Matt, that I want to bring our listeners from Hong Kong this time. February retail sales value has dropped by 44% year on year. So that's even worse than the estimated 40.3%. And retail sales, so that number from Hong Kong. But I also want to talk a bit more about Europe and go live to Brussels, where Bloomberg's Maria Tadeo is standing by. So, obviously the economic repercussions being felt everywhere. I just want to start, though, in Europe in terms of where we are with the pandemic here. Do you think that we have actually managed to turn a corner when it comes to Italy as we watch that country so closely?
Well, I think what we're seeing right now is that when you look at the daily increase in the number of new cases, and this is one of the figures that people do like to pay a lot of attention to, even more than the actual number of deaths, because there's a lag there between catching the virus to actually dying from the virus, unfortunately. Those numbers are coming down. And the government is saying that the lockdown measures are starting to pay off, and that means Italy should keep them. Now, in terms of what this means going forward, today, La Stampa newspaper had a story saying that the government is actually inclined to extend the lockdown to May. So that would be another month of really strong containment measures to prevent the spread from peaking again. Have we turned the corner? Well, it would be hard to speculate whether this is this and we're going to see a major decline going forward, but the numbers are not climbing, and that is good enough because, again, it would show that to the very least, or at the very least, the virus is being contained. And we're hearing a similar story, by the way, coming out of Spain, which is the other big focus point. The numbers overall are huge. They're big, more than 80,000 cases. People are dying, again, unfortunately, by the hundreds every day. But the government is saying that they do see signals that cases have become stable. And in Madrid, which is the equivalent of Lombardia in the north of Italy, those numbers are also coming down by a touch. Very small number, but they're not climbing either.
All right, so still very bad, very serious hotspot for Spain. On the financial side, the ECB has asked banks to stop dividends and buybacks. And we're seeing it also from other corporates. What's the story there?
Right, Matt. So last week, I'm sure you know the European Central Bank put out a note saying this is our guideline going forward, and we would suggest no one pays out a dividend and they focus on lending. So I think the message is pretty clear. The European Central Bank is not here to pay for your dividends, and they're not here to make sure that you hit your financial targets for the year. The money, the liquidity is out there, but it's out there for a purpose, and that is to kickstart the economy and make sure that you're lending to businesses, in particular the SMEs, which are badly hit for this and are probably making, at this point, zero money because they've been shut for weeks now. And the same we're probably going to hear from governments who are essentially willing to back up loans, to put credit lines out there to companies. But the goal is to keep them alive and to make sure that they can go back to business. So they're probably going to say, we don't want to see any buybacks. We don't want to see any action that is meant for shareholders. This really has to be something that is designed to help the real economy.
Okay, Bloomberg's Maria Tadeo, thank you so much for joining us live from Brussels there. Yeah, as the World Health Organization, Matt, says that there are some signs of stabilization in terms of the outbreak in Europe. But, obviously the figures are absolutely worrying.
Yeah, for sure, especially in Italy and Spain. Let's get the rest of the world national news headlines right now. For that, we go to Leanne Gerrans. Leanne?
Matt, good morning. The UK government is facing renewed pressure to speed up virus testing. There was confusion after the government said it had hit a target of 10,000 tests a day. But Health Department statistics showed only 7,000 people were actually receiving them. They say that's down to people being tested twice. There are concerns the UK is falling far behind its European peers in testing for the virus. Now to France, which reported 418 new deaths due to COVID-19, the biggest daily number of fatalities, bringing the total number of deaths to over 3,000. Bloomberg's Anya Nussbaum says this number is an underestimation, as it only includes people who've died inside hospitals.
France should release new numbers to give a fuller picture later this week. And it's going to hurt. Good news is that France has managed to increase the number of beds in intensive care units from 5,000 when the crisis started to 8,000 today, and more soon. As of Monday, there were more than 5,000 patients treated for COVID in French intensive care unit. In Paris, Anya Nussbaum, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Hungary's parliament has handed Prime Minister Viktor Orban the right to rule by decree indefinitely. Bloomberg's Zoltan Shiman has the story.
Orban says he will now be able to fight the coronavirus even if Parliament cannot convene. But opposition groups who wanted a time limit for emergency rule said Orban is using the pandemic to effectively establish one-man rule in the EU nation. In Budapest, Zoltán Simon, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And Russia's moving towards a lockdown across the world's largest country by area as it tries to halt the spread of coronavirus. Bloomberg's Henry Mayer has more on the restrictions in Moscow.
The Russian capital's 12.7 million people were ordered not to leave home starting Monday, with limited exceptions for emergencies, under restrictions also adopted in the second largest city, St. Petersburg. In Moscow, Henry Mayer, Bloomberg Daybreak, Europe.
Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg. Caroline.
Thank you so much, Leanne Gerrans, with all the world news. Obviously, more impact when it comes to coronavirus on the sports world. Here's that news with Richard Newman.
Newcastle are understood to have become the first Premier League club to put the majority of their non-playing staff on the leave of absence due to coronavirus. The affected employees will have to sign up for the government's COVID-19 job retention scheme, which pays 80% of wages up to £2,500 a month. Over 60 non-league clubs have written to the Football Association asking it to reconsider the decision to write off their season. The signatories say they agree with halting the campaign due to the pandemic, but have questioned why the Premier League and EFL could yet finish their seasons later in the year while their own has been cancelled. Lancashire cricket chairman David Hodgkiss is believed to be the first person directly involved in professional British sport to pass away having tested positive for COVID-19. He died aged 71, and it's understood he had underlying health issues.
Let's get the U.S. sports with Pete Fox.
So the story goes that Tom Brady was doing all the talking and pitching the Buccaneers on acquiring him, not vice versa. The Bucs general manager saying that he, along with Bruce Arians and Tom Brady, had a very nice conversation. They talked for over an hour and a half, and Tom made it clear in the conversation that he was very, very interested. It was almost like a recruitment on his part, telling us why it would make sense for him to come play in Tampa Bay. And more than 115 athletes, coaches, and sports personalities from 13 countries have joined together for a coronavirus relief fund. The group includes Steph Curry, Mark Cuban, Dale Earnhardt Jr., Tony Hawk, Michael Phelps, David Ortiz, and Michael Strahan, who have all donated items to be auctioned off. I'm Pete Fox, Dr. Bloomberg, NBC World Sports Update.
Okay, so that's the sports news. Next up, we're going to digest today's rebalancing with Eric Nielsen, Group Chief Economist at UniCredit, as markets wrap up, obviously, what's been a very volatile quarter. Matt, they're actually doing well at the moment, but it has been one of the toughest months and quarters for global equity markets that we've seen ever. So we'll discuss that with Eric Nielsen, along with, of course, his take on the rebound in Europe. When does it come? This is Bloomberg.
Hi, everyone. Al Roker here. As a guy with his own catchphrase, I appreciate that after 75 years, Smokey's only said,
"Only you can prevent wildfires."
But I'm filling in because there's a lot more to report. Like when it's dry or windy. Be careful burning yard waste, because wildfires can even start in your neck of the woods. Go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
Something remarkable happens when just the right elements come together. Ideas with technology, data with inspiration, investors with solutions. This is what Invesco does every day, because they believe the possibilities of life and investing are greater when we come together. Invesco. Let's invest in greater possibilities together. To learn more, visit Invesco.com/together. Invesco Distributors, Incorporated.
Message and data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at Babbel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
Not all heroes wear capes, but most wear tights.
And here we go. Now it's underway. Cover on Rowan. Win. Seconds.
Keep up with everything happening in the wild world of pro wrestling with a TuneIn podcast. For expert analysis of the latest WrestleMania, turn on the WWE podcast. Or listen to the Steve Austin Show for no-holds-barred conversations with wrestling's biggest personalities.
It's good to be here tonight. It's an empty building.
For these and more, search sports and scroll down to the world of wrestling.
Next time on the New Yorker Radio Hour, I'll talk with our Washington correspondent about the many political battles being waged in the Capitol over how to deal with the new coronavirus.
You couldn't imagine a president personalizing a crisis with a virus, but somehow that's where we are.
Susan Glasser. Listen to this episode of the New Yorker Radio Hour on TuneIn today.
A lot of people aren't aware that TuneIn lets you listen to the same terrestrial stations that you pick up on your FM AM dial, except you can hear them from anywhere. To see all the stations broadcasting in your area, find the local radio section on the home screen. Keep it local with TuneIn.
Want to know a great way to discover the latest and greatest sports audio on TuneIn? It's easy. Just make sure push notifications are enabled on your phone to receive recommendations of sports talk radio and podcasts, along with important breaking news updates.
Leave it to the New York Times to make the most intelligent pop music podcast out there.
Welcome to the New York Times Popcast.
On the Popcast, the Times music staff gets together for a weekly roundtable on the hottest topics in popular music. From award show autopsies and reactions to new releases to difficult-to-process scandals and emerging themes in the music landscape, hear distinguished music critics share their perspectives on the latest music news, songs, albums, and artists of note on the New York Times Popcast. Search and favorite Popcast to join the conversation.
Blasio is appealing for help from the federal government.
And Bloomberg 1130 is here for you with the latest coronavirus updates.
The city is approaching critical mass in the need for hospital beds.
Live from Bloomberg World Headquarters in New York.
Governor Andrew Cuomo, he's going to give an update.
For the latest news from in and around the tri-state area.
New York's MTA says the coronavirus has decimated revenue.
Stay with Bloomberg 1130, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets, and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscriptions.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their business strategically. Yet, the most competitive managers in the market know, with the right partner and a flexible operating platform, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
I'm Steve Meyer, president of SEI's Investment Manager Services. At SEI, we understand the emerging forces that will define success for asset managers and what firms will need to compete tomorrow. That's why we continually optimize SEI's global operating platform. If your business requires greater agility, our advanced technology, integrated best-in-class systems, and multi-asset expertise can be your catalyst for business transformation.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
Grow your own. Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Good morning from London. I'm Caroline Hepker with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. So European equities are higher this morning, 1.7% up on the US Stock 600. FTSE 100 bounds higher 2%, and the Xetra DAX gains 2.2%. Having said that, for global equities, we are on track to round off the worst quarter since the last 3 months of 2008, and no surprise given the spread of the pandemic. The World Health Organization saying on Monday that it's our fervent hope that Italy and Spain are approaching a peak in terms of the virus. In Italy, we've had 11,000 people who've died from it, but we are still watching the numbers very closely. In terms of the futures for the US market open, a lot of volatility this morning, but we are positive at the moment. So S&P 500 E-mini futures up by 0.6%. In the bond markets, we traded 70 basis points for US Treasury yields, negative 48 for German bond yields. German yields actually gaining just a basis point, along with UK yields, which are higher at 4 basis points right now. It comes after China's PMI figure for manufacturing rebounded for March, although it's soft data, not hard data. So we'll have to wait for more news as to how quickly China really is rebounding. And of course, pan-European aggregate bond returns, the worst month on record, and for US Treasuries, the best quarter since 2008. In terms of the dollar, we're stronger 0.3%. That's also something we've been watching very closely. The strong dollar continues. That is a Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Goetz with more what's going on around the world. Good morning.
Caroline, good morning. The coronavirus outbreak in Italy and Spain may be approaching a peak. That's the hope of the World Health Organization. It says there are signs of stabilization as Italy sees the smallest number of new cases in almost 2 weeks. The nation is set to extend its current containment measures until after Easter. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, his family and close aides have tested negative for coronavirus. His office said in a statement one of his aides, who he was in contact with, has the virus, prompting them to go into self-isolation and be tested. He will remain in quarantine until receiving further instructions from the health ministry. And finally, the owner of the video chat app House Party is offering $1 million reward. That's for evidence the company has been a victim of a commercial commercial smear campaign. Rumors online suggest that downloading the app will lead to other services such as Netflix and Spotify being hacked. The company said there is no evidence to back up these claims. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg. Matt.
Leanne, thank you very much for that. Leanne Gerrans there with your World National News. Now, coming up, our colleagues in the U.S. are getting ready for Bloomberg Daybreak from their home bunkers. Let's check in with Nathan Hager to see what he's got prepared for us. Nathan?
The socially distant studio. Good morning, Matt. Well, we are looking at the latest efforts to contain the coronavirus itself in the U.S., not just the economic fallout. We have more states issuing stay-at-home orders now. Used to be suggestions. Now many governors are telling their citizens it's an order now. That includes the entire Washington, D.C. region. But that isn't stopping lawmakers on Capitol Hill from getting to work on another round of stimulus, even as they debate what was in that last one, the record $2.2 trillion measure that's just beginning to trickle into the economy. So we'll have the latest on those efforts. As for markets, getting ready to close the book on the worst quarter for stocks since the last financial crisis. But with this health crisis still playing out around the world, is it safe to call bottom? We're going to get perspective this morning from Ben Emmons at Medley Global Advisors, as well as Jeremy Stretch, head of G10FX at CIBC. They'll join me and Karen Moscow this morning for Bloomberg Daybreak Americas. Matt?
Looking forward to it, Nathan. Thanks very much. Nathan coming up with Karen next. If you're listening on Sirius XM, good morning. If you're tuned in on London DAB digital radio, you'll hear Bloomberg Surveillance.
Yes, indeed. Now, coming up, let's bring in our guests for this part of the program. Risk assets are gaining today after we had China's official PMI gauge bouncing back into expansion in March. And yet, the data on US consumer confidence, which is due out later, could dent that positive mood. Obviously, we've seen the recent slump in UK and European consumer sentiment. For more, let's bring in Eric Nielsen, who is Group Chief Economist at UniCredit. Eric, thank you so much for joining us. In terms of today's market, does the data even matter right now? Is the panic selling over? How much did the China PMI figures do for markets in your view?
Good morning. Yeah, that's a very good question. I think one should take all the data with a huge grain of salt, starting with the Chinese PMIs, which, as you know, bounced very strongly. That's driven by, as far as I can judge, by the simple question, have you seen an increase in demand? And the answer is obviously yes, since you are through the trough in China, but you shouldn't take this with a 52 reading as a sign that you are back in good positive growth. But it's good news, right? I think the data are across the board so uncertain that it is almost meaningless. We are in Europe and in America, without a doubt, in my opinion, still sliding down towards a very deep trough. And the question is really just how deep, and then is it a V or a U-shaped recovery we get?
One of the things that's been freaking me out, Eric, for a couple days now is I keep seeing small business owners or just regular gig workers taking on debt right now because they have no income and they're missing out on income for this month or the next 2 or 3 months, who knows, right? That they're never going to get back, but they will be stuck with this debt that they're amassing now. How does that work out on the other side of this?
Well, Matt, that's the $1 million question right now. How do you help these businesses, number one, to stay afloat? And various programs across Europe, particularly in Germany, have these massive amounts of guarantees available for businesses. And as a bank, I can tell you that we are working feverishly with the government agencies to get the forms filled out. And from what I hear from my colleagues, certainly the agencies, KfW in Germany and likewise other countries are are getting up and running. The numbers are huge, but they are administering it in a very flexible and productive way in many ways. So that's a good news. But it is still a matter of getting the money out to people who need cash flow. And then the next question,
but Eric,
of course,
the problem with that, of course, is that these people are going to be saddled with debt after the crisis. And in a lot of cases, these government guarantees are helping the less fortunate borrow money to make whole landlords and banks. So then you have even more sort of wealth inequality on the other side of this than you had to begin with, and consumers who may not make purchases because now they have loans.
Well, I'm not sure there will be a lot of purchases here. Right? In many ways, I think you would, because the people don't get out to spend money. So there is the supply shock and the fear of economics of fear, if you will. But the question you ask, which I struggle with, obviously, is what happens to the debt afterwards? What happens to the companies? And I think the answer is we don't know yet, right? But the burden depends, of course, on the real interest rate. So should we be lucky and get negative real interest rates, we don't get the wealth transfer you're worried about.
Yeah.
But I also think that there's a lot of these guarantees which will simply be converted into public debt. In Austria, they have been very explicit about it, leaving a huge opening for the government to simply convert guarantees into debt one day, or into grants. Sorry. So this remains to be seen. But you're right. We will end up after this with a lot more debt, particularly on the public sector side, but also among a number of companies and households.
And so in all of this, I mean, we had the European inflation figures out this morning. Are you in the camp of being worried about deflation, significant deflation in Europe also?
No, I'm not. If you think about deflation in the normal sense of the word, which is a longer-term process, right? We will have, number one, huge relative price changes now because the consumption pattern and demand pattern are shifting so dramatically between goods and services and within the goods sectors, and we have the supply shock. So I think the overall inflation numbers for the next few months or maybe a couple of quarters are going to be very difficult to understand, but there will be huge relative price changes within them, without a doubt. Beyond the crisis, Matt's question about on the other side, are we going to get deflation? I don't think so, but it's a risk. But there is a lot of money being pumped into the system now, and some of it will chase goods and thereby inflation down the line.
All right, it's fascinating indeed, tragic, of course, on the healthcare side, but fascinating on the economic side, at least from the sort of the science or the art of it. Eric, we're going to hear more from you in just a moment on Bloomberg Television. Eric Nielsen is going to go on Bloomberg Surveillance. So if you're tuned in here on London DAB digital radio, you will hear that. Otherwise, you're going to hear Daybreak Americas. But if you want to hear more from Eric, just switch over to the television using a traditional box or on your Bloomberg terminal, type TV Go. This is Bloomberg.
Hello. Leave it to the New York Times to make the most intelligent pop music podcast out there.
Welcome to the New York Times Popcast.
On the Popcast, the Times music staff gets together for a weekly roundtable on the hottest topics in popular music. From award show autopsies and reactions to new releases to difficult-to-process scandals and emerging themes in the music landscape, hear distinguished music critics share their perspectives on the latest music news, songs, albums, and artists of note on the New York Times Popcast. Search and favorite Popcast to join the conversation.
From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios, this is Bloomberg Daybreak for Tuesday, March 31st, 2020. Coming up this hour.
States across the country ramp up measures to contain the spread of COVID-19.
Deaths in New York surge as cases across the country pass 160,000.
In Washington, Congress and the White House begin work on a fourth stimulus bill to stem the fallout.
Governors in the tri-state area asked for medical volunteers across the nation to help fight COVID-19. Plus, the pandemic brings abortion to the forefront front, I'm Michael Barr. More ahead.
I'm Rob Bushka. Ahead in sports, former Knicks Stephon Marbury's reach goes far beyond basketball in an unprecedented move in college sports.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak. On Bloomberg 1130 New York, Bloomberg 99.1 Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 106.1 Boston, Bloomberg 960 San Francisco, Sirius XM 119, and around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
Good morning, I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow, and U.S. futures are higher this morning, pointing to possible gains for the fifth time in 6 sessions. We're coming up to 5:01 on Wall Street, and we check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. Right now, S&P futures are up 18 points, Dow futures up 158, and NASDAQ futures up 81. The DAX in Germany is up 2.33%, CAC in Paris up 1.5%, and the FTSE 100 up 2.1%. Nikkei 225 in Japan was down 0.9%, and the Hang Seng in Hong Kong gained 1.9%. 10-year Treasury up 6/32, yield 0.70%. Yield on the 2-year 0.23%. NYMEX crude oil up 5.7%, up $1.16 at $21.25 a barrel. COMEX gold down 1.1% or $18.40 at $16.24.80 an ounce. The euro 1.0980 against the dollar, and the yen is at 108.46. Nathan.
And Karen, we begin this morning with the latest on the spread of COVID-19 and corresponding lockdowns in states across the country. Maryland, Virginia, and Washington, D.C. are the latest to issue stay-at-home orders as U.S. coronavirus cases pass 160,000. The next month will be key for stemming the outbreak, according to President Trump.
Challenging times are ahead for the next 30 days, and this is a very vital 30 days.
And now we're learning the White House has considered issuing a nationwide stay-at-home order. The matter has been discussed, but the president says there are no plans to go through with it at the moment.
If we do that, we will let you know, but it's pretty unlikely, I would think, at this time.
Stay-at-home orders allow people to leave home only for limited reasons like buying groceries or medicine.
Meantime, the White House and Democrats in Congress are getting to work on a 4th stimulus bill to stem the fallout from the outbreak. Here with details is Bloomberg's Anne-Marie Hordern.
The White House says, according to people familiar, that they've been discussing with agencies, and the total will be about $600 billion. This will be for state aid, financial instruments for the mortgage market, as well as potentially another injection of direct checks to Americans. Nancy Pelosi said they're collecting information and taking inventory. A possible move would be getting rid of the limit on state and local tax deductions, but already a Republican said that idea is a non-starter.
Many priorities outlined by House Speaker Pelosi were part of an alternative stimulus bill proposed last week. Those measures, however, were rejected by Senate leaders in negotiations with the White House.
Confirmed COVID-19 cases worldwide now number 780,000 as the virus continues to spread through Europe and the U.S. We have Bloomberg Radio team coverage on the latest, beginning with Bloomberg's John Tucker live in New York. Good morning, John.
And good morning, Nathan. New York City continues to be the epicenter of this outbreak, reporting a 16% increase in fatalities over just 6 hours. Statewide, there are 66,000 infections. That's accounting for 40% of nationwide cases. Still, there's a glimmer of hope. Governor Andrew Cuomo says the rise in infections is slowing and the hospital discharge rate is rising.
We have a range of anywhere from about 1 week for the apex. Some people saying another 21 days. Some people say the apex is about half of what the others say. That's one of the things that's so bedeviling about this.
Researchers at the University of Washington predict the U.S. outbreak won't peak for another 2 weeks. So far, deaths across the U.S. number almost 3,000. I'm John Tucker in New York, and now for the latest on the outbreak in Europe, here's Carolyn Hepker live in London.
John, thank you. Here in the UK, we have 22,000 infections, though there are concerns over the amount of testing that is actually taking place. Italy, though, remains the epicenter in Europe with cases eclipsing 100,000. The country is considering extending lockdown measures as fatalities pass 11,000. France is reporting its most deaths in a day. It's third in the region for fatalities. fatalities with 3,000 victims. Spain is number 2, closing in on 8,000 deaths. The World Health Organization expects infections in Europe to stabilize soon, saying that outbreaks in Italy and Spain could be nearing their peak. That's the latest from Europe. In the meantime, in China, we're getting economic data showing that the worst may be over for the outbreak there, as Chinese manufacturing shows a strong rebound. For the latest on that, we turn to Bloomberg's Brian Curtis in Hong Kong.
The PMI surged to 52, crushing an estimate of 44.8 and well above last month's 35.7. But that comes just as orders tank from the United States and Europe. And even China says companies are facing a lot of pressure. That was borne out by new export orders staying in contraction mode. Still, a win is a win, and the outlook is improving at home. The services PMI, 52.3, up from just 29.6 in February. In Hong Kong, Brian Curtis, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Brian, thanks. Upbeat data for sure, but it did little to boost stocks in Asia overnight. Equities in the region finished the session mixed. And here with details is Bloomberg's Juliet Sally in Singapore. Good morning, Juliet.
Good morning, Nathan and Karen. Japanese equities and the yen fell as end of financial year positioning in Japan saw dollars in demand. The Nikkei 225 closed lower by 0.9%. Financials were the laggards. Sentiment in China was boosted by better than expected PMI data for March, although analysts were quick to point out it is too early to read too much into the jump. The CSI 300 closed higher by 0.33%. Over the quarter, the MSCI Asia Pacific Index was down more than 20%, the biggest drop since the third quarter of 2008 to hold at December 2016 lows. In Singapore, I'm Juliet Sali, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Juliet, thank you. As we enter the last day of the month, U.S. stocks are set for their worst quarter since 2008. The Dow is down 21%, the S&P 500 lower by 18%. The worst performer on the Dow is Boeing, while only one member of the index in the green. Microsoft is higher by 1.6% on the year. Straight ahead, the latest world and national news, and this is Bloomberg.
All right, Karen, thank you. It is 5:07 on Wall Street. Now let's bring in Michael Barr with the latest on efforts to stem the coronavirus here and around the world. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Nathan. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo has put out an urgent plea for medical volunteers as coronavirus deaths in New York City mount and hospitals are overwhelmed. The death toll in the state is above 1,200.
As governor of New York, I am asking healthcare professionals across the country, if you don't have a healthcare crisis in your community, please come help us in New York now.
Authorities say it could be a preview of what other cities across the U.S. will soon face. New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy says he's grateful for the medical professionals who have come out of retirement or have had volunteered their services to join their colleagues in the fight against the COVID-19 pandemic.
As of right now, we have had 3,611 individuals respond to this call, and we're incredibly grateful for their selflessness and patriotism.
There are more than 16,600 cases in New Jersey of COVID-19 with about 200 deaths. In Pennsylvania, Governor Tom Wolf says there is no set time for businesses and schools to reopen in his state.
Our business and school closures will no longer have a set date to resume normal operations. Up until now, I've been saying another 2 weeks. Now I'm going to leave the date indefinite.
The San Francisco Bay Area shelter-in-place order will remain in place. Bloomberg's Ed Baxter has the story.
San Francisco Mayor London Breed says at least another month.
Should definitely plan to stay at home, and this process and what we're doing here will continue until at least May 1st.
She says to protect public health, and she says people, for the most part, are practicing social distancing. In San Francisco, I'm Ed Baxter, Bloomberg Daybreak.
A legal battle over abortions during the coronavirus pandemic continues in Texas. The state's attorney general claims the procedure is not essential and uses up vital resources to fight the virus. Federal judges in Ohio, Texas, and Alabama have blocked orders banning non-essential medical procedures from limiting abortion access during the outbreak, a win for abortion rights activists. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Nathan.
Thanks, Michael. It's 5:09 on Wall Street. Now time for the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update. Good morning, Rob Bushka.
Good morning, Nathan. Former Knick and native New Yorker Stephon Marbury could lend a major hand to the fight of the coronavirus right here in New York. Marbury, a coach in China, is trying to coordinate efforts to help China sell at a discounted rate 10 million masks to the boroughs of New York City. It's not as easy as it sounds, though, according to Marbury. In a video conference interview with Mark Spears, there's a lot of red tape.
You got to go through the whole, the legalities. You got to go through the pyramid for them to sign off there. You got to give them the sample. You got to let them see it, touch it. It has to be N95. We got all of that. Now we just waiting to just get the last part. We handling all of the paperwork, give them the mask, let them see it, which the mask comes from a huge factory here in China. And then after that, we go from there.
Marbury originally said he was told weeks ago Brooklyn didn't need masks, but they've since reconsidered and are reaching out. Marbury has family in the area, including many relatives on Coney Island. A different form of tampering, perhaps, facing the NFL. That's if you ask free agent safety Eric Reed. He wants the new collective bargaining agreement invalidated over language added after the pact earlier this month was signed. He's calling for both a revote and an investigation. His lawyers said language posted on the Players Association's website on March 15th contains different language from the one the players signed off on. The new CBA kicks in this season for the next 10 years. And in an unprecedented move in college sports, the NCAA ruled to give all current spring athletes one more year of eligibility because of the pandemic and all the championships this year, including March Madness, that were canceled. And that's your NBC Bloomberg Sports Update. Nathan?
All right, Rob, thank you. We're seeing a lift to U.S. equity futures and European stocks as we close out this rough first quarter. S&P futures higher by 19 points. Dow futures up 165. NASDAQ futures a gain of 87 points. The 10-year's up 6/30 seconds, yield 0.70%. 2-year Treasury yield 0.23%. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
Elite advisory firms rely on BNY Mellon's Pershing to meet the needs of their most complex clients. Karen Novak, Chief Operating Officer at Pershing Advisor Solutions, explains how.
At BNY Mellon's Pershing, we bring customized insights and strategies to help you grow your advisory business and stay on the leading edge. We can support the needs of your most sophisticated clients with a full range of investment and wealth management solutions, from access to private banking to consolidated bank and brokerage custody. Learn why so many of the largest advisory firms turn to us for the financial strength and high-touch service that BNY Mellon's Pershing can provide. Are you well positioned to stand out from your competition?
Learn more at Pershing.com or call 800-445-4467. Brokerage custody provided by Pershing LLC and other services provided by Pershing Advisor Solutions LLC. Both members of FINRA and SIPC. Private banking and bank custody provided by BNY Mellon NA. Member FDIC.
Message and data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at babbel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
I love dogs and cats. Short-haired, long-haired. I love you all, don't I, Bianca? But I don't love cat hair all over my carpet, which is why I got a job testing vacuum cleaners in the Witch Test Lab. We rub an exact amount of real pet hair into an exact area of real carpet to see which vacuum cleaners really suck it up. And the vacuums that perform best are the only ones we recommend for your home. Witch.co.uk. Our tests find you the best.
Didn't get a seat on the bus? Get the best seat in the house with a Sky Store movie tonight.
Philip asked me to marry him. No, love doesn't end well. Let us prove you wrong.
Stay in for a spellbinding night with Maleficent, Mistress of Evil.
I consider Aurora my own.
Watch the latest movie straight from the cinema.
We'll do our best to protect you.
Disney's Maleficent, Mistress of Evil. Available now in Sky Store.
Leave it to the New York Times to make the most intelligent pop music podcast out there.
Welcome to the New York Times Popcast.
On the Popcast, the Times music staff gets together for a weekly roundtable on the hottest topics in popular music. From award show autopsies and reactions to new releases to difficult-to-process scandals and emerging themes in the music landscape, hear distinguished music critics share their perspectives on the latest music news, songs, albums, and artists of note on the New York Times Popcast. Search and favorite Popcast to join the conversation.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
On this week's On the Media, we are awash in messages, but some messengers are more effective than others.
Ventilators, ventilators, ventilators. We need 30,000.
Meanwhile, some media outlets choose not to air the president's press briefings live, and media critics ponder what's the right balance between good information and all information. All that and more on this week's On the Media from WNYC. Listen to the On the Media podcast on TuneIn today.
From Bloomberg Television, here's Heidi Stroud-Watts.
Asian stocks look set to extend the rally on Wall Street. In fact, Australia already joining in there. Investors seeing glimmers of optimism in more rapid testing for the coronavirus. Our next guest says that potentially that means some market stability for a few weeks. Joining us now is Tribeca Investment Partners Portfolio Manager Junbei Liu. Junbei, great to see you again. My question is, if you see that we've kind of bottomed out, is that only for the next few weeks? And therefore, how do you invest if we know that more downside is likely to come?
Certainly, we are seeing bottoming in the equity market, and we are seeing incredible amount of opportunities in terms of good quality companies at very discounted price. Now, if you look at what has caused this, it's the virus infection state, and most of the economy are still in lockdown, across the OECD countries. So it's very hard to see equity rallying away on the basis that the infection rate is still getting worse, and the employment numbers continue to track lower. So on these bases, you can say that the equity has, although it's found the bottom, but it might go up and down and a little bit directionless, and for the time being, for the next few weeks. But for investors, you need to take at least 3 to 6 month view.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. European stocks are climbing along with U.S. stock index futures for the 5th time in 6 sessions, spurring investor debate over whether the meltdown has ended given the continued spread of the coronavirus. Treasuries are advancing. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg.